whenever you're ready.
Am I live? Okay. Thank you for joining this event. We'll be starting here shortly with our first panel. Um, it's pretty exciting. We have all these teams together here in Toronto. I did want to do an introduction of myself. My name is Jared. I'm a member of Startale and the Star Foundation. Startale is one of the sponsors for this event. And what we do at Startale is making it easy for anyone to get in the blockchain by connecting to different layers of blockchain. So that would be the blockchain level with the Star and Ethereum, providing cloud services, and then probably the most important one is working with different businesses and organizations and bring them into blockchain, like Sony, Toyota, Casio, but then also all these great guests that'll be speaking here today. So there's two things I wanted to go over before I hand it over to the first panel. The first thing will be an agenda. So what we'll have is we'll have three panels today. The first panel will be talking about innovation in Web3. So we'll have a great panel talking about this. The second panel will be moderated by SheFi. And this will be talking about building community in Web3, something that's very unique in our industry. And the final panel will be talking about crypto in Canada, the challenges we face, and also celebrate some of the great victories we have, particularly here in Toronto is a unique spot. And finally, before handing over to the first panel, which will start shortly, I'd like to thank some of the sponsors. So the sponsors that we have, first one would be Defiant. Thank you for live streaming this and doing all the planning in behind the scenes. ChainSafe donated their office for this event, and you can't see it, but we have lots of people here chit-chatting, and that's really nice to have. We also have Chain Patrol. They really saw this as a great way to connect with the local community. And I don't want to talk too much about them, but they have a really great product that keeps Web3 safe with new solutions. Code is also sponsoring the drinks. Very unique because now anyone who visits here, whether they're Web3 or Web2, can take control of their money and be directly on blockchain. And then finally, Startale. This was an idea that we had with Defiant, ChainSafe, and Startale. And we could all get behind the idea of connecting with the community. And where's a better spot to connect with the community than here in Toronto at the Futures event? Thank you. We'll start the panel here shortly.
Grab a settle. I gotta go up there. See you. Your name again? Jay. Jay. Let's go.
All right. Well, welcome everyone. Great to be here at the Northern Mixer. Excited that the Defiant is a proud media partner. I'm Camila, the founder of the Defiant. Hopefully that's how you all get your Web3 and DeFi news. I'll let the panelists introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Nikita. I'm the co-founder, CEO of Chain Patrol. We're a security company protecting crypto users from phishing attacks and impersonation and all those fake scammer drops that you've seen on Twitter.
Awesome. My name is Ted Livingston. I'm the founder and CEO of Code. Code is a global payments app we're building on top of blockchain. A little bit of my background, I started Kick Messenger in 2009. We built a massive chat app. There's no good way to make money, so we had this crazy idea to launch a cryptocurrency. We did that in 2017. And then it was a journey to actually make crypto usable as an actual payments technology. So that took a bunch of years. We were actually the first project in the world to move to the Solana blockchain before it even had a price on CoinMarketCap. And then once we were there, we started working on this wallet app, and I've been doing that. So hopefully you all got a beer on Code and saw how simple, fast, easy it is. So we're building more and more of that.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us. My name is Aiden. I'm one of the co-founders and CEO at ChainSafe Systems, and at ChainSafe we're a blockchain research and development firm that also builds products to help make open source developer tools more accessible for lots of different developers, writing lots of different native programming languages in different blockchain environments. We love building blockchains and building implementations of blockchains and supporting networks in kind of the pursuit of decentralization and just better tech together through collaborative open source models. So yeah, thanks for joining us here today with all the panelists, the team at the Defiant. Y'all are awesome. So thank you.
Thank you.
It's a very nice space. My name's Jay, and I'm the director of a media company called The Koos. K-U-S, The Koos.
Okay, so this panel is about innovation in Web3, but I want to get us all on the same page about, dreaming big and what the potential of Web3 actually is supposed to be. I know that we're not there yet, but what is this goal that we're all working towards?
Yeah, well, for me, the gold standard that I'm trying to push crypto towards is that like my grandma can go to the store and she's buying groceries and she's coming home and it's all done on crypto payment rails in the background. It's safe for her, it's easy to use, and honestly that's the money that they actually own, right? I think in countries like Canada, the US, like our banking systems are like okay, they're not amazing, but they're okay. And so like we take a lot of things for granted, but I come from Belarus and we've had a lot of issues with our banking systems. There's a lot of other countries that have had a ton of issues where, your money, you just don't own your money anymore, right? And so that's the kind of future I want to push towards, and part of that is safety. Right now, why I'm building Chain Patrol and where I think a lot of the innovation is coming through right now is, there's a lot of things out there targeting people. Like new users, it's very hard to get into the space. Not just because of like even technical barriers, or like there's people like Code and others that are getting rid of a lot of the I just downloaded that app in 2 seconds and got crypto and bought a drink, right? But then the next step is now that money is very easy to steal. There are ways you can get tricked into through a phishing attack or a scam. And so when you take ownership for yourself over money, the issue then becomes is now there's no crypto support line. There's nothing that will go ahead and protect you if you do something, if you mess up, if you get tricked into something. So there's a lot of innovation happening around transaction simulation and stuff that also Chain Patrol's doing around finding these scammers and impersonations. Just I think if all that crypto does is like we can just transact money that we actually own in a safe manner, already a major win. Like everything else is like cherry on top bonus.
Okay, so transacting money in a more efficient, safe way.
Yes,
It's
yeah,
big.
and money that you own and can't be stolen from you.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about for you?
So I agree with a lot of what you said there. Like I think we have a pretty similar vision. Like to me, I think payments are pretty good. They're bad in some countries, they're pretty good in the West. But when I look at it even beyond that, I think of if it was actually possible to innovate on the existing money systems, even in the West, what might we be able to build with it? And sort of the analogy I bring to this is, so I built this messaging app, 15 years ago now. And we launched in 2010, it went viral, 0 to 1 million users in 15 days. Again, this is almost 15 years ago now, 1 million to 2 million users in 7 days, like fastest growing thing in human history up until that point in time. And the reason we could go viral is, like at the time, people were looking at texting with, AT&T or Verizon or Bell or Rogers, whatever it is, and like, what? This is pretty good. This is pretty good. And you couldn't innovate on top of it. Like there's, if you went, you try to work with Rogers, they're like, oh, we don't want to do that. You work with AT&T, we don't want to do that. Oh, you're trying to work with AT&T and Verizon, impossible. What chat apps let us do is go over the top. When the iPhone came out with their App Store and Android came out with their Play Store, now you could launch one app and you could launch it to the whole world at once. You could build a new feature and roll it out to the whole world at once. And so very quickly, we went from like, wait, why would anybody want that, to WhatsApp sells in the largest exit in venture capitalist history. And I think there's a similar opportunity with crypto and blockchain and self-custodial crypto, where it's an opportunity, once again, to go over the top. So now instead of, you're trying to work with this bank or that bank in this country or that country, it's so convoluted, it's impossible, there's zero innovation. Now with self-custodial crypto, you can roll out a new feature and then the whole world can get it at once. And that's what we're really trying to take advantage of at Code. It's been a huge journey to make self-custodial fast, simple, easy to use. We feel like we're just sort of hitting our stride on that. And there's all sorts of things we see that even in the West, where payments are pretty good, that we can make even better, open up all new use cases that never existed before.
Right, so a global financial system that is accessible to everyone, that's safe and efficient. Maybe, I don't know if the next two panelists want to talk more about the non-financial side of Web3.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think we've definitely achieved that. We have trillions and trillions of dollars in stable coins being transacted across the world every year. It's the only thing we've achieved from a product market fit, actually, is stable coins. I think it works great. The question is, how do we get people to use better underlying pieces of infrastructure for those stable coins and not to use Tron? Because, there are some obviously massive ethical and moral and safety concerns with that and being a part of such systems. But at the end of the day, when we were in Istanbul, we didn't see very many Ethereum logos. We saw a lot of Tron logos. And I think we need to be very honest with why an average person wants to use USDT on Tron versus USDC on mainnet ETH or even NEL2. And really start to think more from like the social implication standpoint, from a safety, UX, all of that. It's all solved. We have all the tools, we have all the things we need. We've had it probably for the last 3 years, like the notion of chain abstraction and leveraging different chains as kind of environments for doing specific types of stuff. Like that's been a thing. We've been building side chains on Ethereum literally for 6-7 years. The thing now is, how do we empower people to do a lot more than just transact stablecoins and send remittances around the world, which is in and of itself a massive thing we should applaud ourselves on, but that's not why most people are here. Most people are here for enabling for a true peer-to-peer localized economy to persist within a globalized world that we find ourselves in. At least that's why most people started in this space, and we're yet to figure those things out because those things are not technical problems, those are social problems. And so we have a lot of work to do with that, but I think we will get there. It's just a matter of time.
Can I respond to that just quickly, if you don't mind? Because it was funny, just as you're talking, it's Nikita, right?
Yeah.
Nikita, we were just talking just before we came on stage, And you made like a joke, which I thought was very good, where you're like, yeah, you come to all these crypto conferences, but the only thing you can't do at the conference is spend crypto.
Yeah.
You know, we go to all these crypto conferences and, you know, we're building money, and like, what can you buy with the money at any of these crypto conferences? And so, you know, I know there's lots of USDC volumes, but like, it still seems like nobody's actually using it to transact. We're using it to trade, to speculate, but not really to transact. And even with stable coins, to me, you know, that's not real crypto, right? You know, the first line in the Satoshi white paper is a peer-to-peer system of electronic cash. Like, USDC is not peer-to-peer, it is not trustless. We're trusting Circle and everybody involved with it and their banks to hold that money, and we've seen that they can lose the peg. So not to push back too much, but I agree with you where it's like we still have a long way to go. We see these USDC volumes, and we're so desperate for something. To me, it feels like that we looked at that and say, well, at least we have that. But you actually then get to the conferences, it's not being used for payments, and it's not actually
But
trustless.
I think you've answered the question, because it's what conferences are you going to? Because to the conferences I go to, I can pay in USDC. And so I think it really, that's a question of you and the community you're a part of and the community you want to be a part of and empowered to be a wider voice in this industry. Because yeah, for the past, I guess, 5 years to DevCon, we've been spending money in crypto. And I guess for the last 3 years, ETH Global hackathons have had something that was built on top of kickback, which is a way of, you know, people putting up some money to then go to an event and then they get it back. So yeah, I think it's more a matter of what you're exposing yourself to, because I think we've done all the things.
But I mean, the point is that it's true that crypto payments are far from mainstream. I think we do see them at, you know, specific hackathons and some conferences, not all conferences. But you know, if you go to like most stores, coffee shops, in circles like outside of crypto, it's unlikely that you'll be able to pay with crypto. I think like there are exceptions, obviously, like Argentina.
Why in that situation? Why is that better for the average person?
Well, the idea, and maybe it isn't, maybe you think it isn't, but I think, you know, the point here is that many people in the space are here because they believe that crypto or blockchains are rails for a better financial system. And so if you believe that and you hold stable coins, you might think, you know, I want to self-custody my money, and so I do that with a self-custody wallet, and I want to do a fast, cheap transaction and pay with that instead of having to hold, you know, dollars in a bank and have to trust the bank. And maybe I want to earn yield on those USDCs or stable coins, and I want to put it in DeFi. I don't want to like get 0.23% in a savings account. I don't know.
I think there's also the transaction fees that, like, you know, you can save a couple percent, which for some businesses is like a real margin that matters. And the other thing is, like, I guess, like, you can kind of like build things into your payment system, right? Like, let's say I go to a coffee shop, I pay a certain amount. You can kind of have like a point system built in where, like, you know, every dollar I spend, I also get like maybe not like a full-on token, but something that enables me to like redeem drinks afterwards at the shop or something else that's similar.
Yeah.
I just think that I definitely agree. Like DevCon and ETH Global events are very good examples of how crypto can be used. I think there needs to be a push across all of the different conferences of like, hey, like we can really set the example of like what we want to see in the world, right? Yeah.
Let's maybe let him introduce
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, please go ahead. Yeah.
Waiting for
So
it.
I think if we want to talk about the vision of Web3, we can zoom out and just observe the workhorse of this Web3 vision, which is blockchain. This technology is a super slow database that has this unique characteristic of verifiability. So, with the caveat that it's uncorruptible. So if we want to talk about where we can go from Web 2 was the introduction of writing to the internet, which introduced this deluge of bullshit. Anybody can write things on the internet that aren't true. We can't verify what people say on the internet is true. Blockchain, if it's uncorruptible, allows us to reference things that have happened in the past and know whether or not they're true. These can be payments. These can be the ownership of gaming assets, the origin of electricity, All these verticals rely on this one unique feature that is verifiable. Now, it can't be corruptible. It can't stop working for a day because then it's not a useful piece of technology. It can't be captured by a few people because then they can change the truth. What Web3 offers us is a verifiable internet, which is something that we're drowning in today, especially with the introduction of AI, which is driving down the price of creating bullshit.
Okay, so to you, the promise of Web3 is to be like an anti-bullshit machine for the internet.
That's what it is. Blockchains that are well decentralized, uncorrupted, uncorruptible, are sources of truth. And we can trust them without having to trust any individual.
But what about like all the like thousands of meme coins per day? That's a lot of bullshit.
But just for context, for what you said, right, is we are in
Yeah.
Toronto right now, right?
Yeah.
And Ethereum was founded based on the principles that he's described. There was
Yeah.
a human coordination layer. It wasn't financial payment rails for a cheaper and swifter Swift.
Let me respond to that question.
Yeah.
Because it's not that blockchain will mean that everything on the internet is true.
Uh-huh.
It just allows us to verify certain things that are on the blockchain.
Yes. Okay.
So the balances of those meme coins, if they're on an uncorruptible chain, which many of them are not, that is true. We can verify that. The story that they're going to go to the moon and give you generational wealth, that's not necessarily on the blockchain.
Exactly. Okay,
Yeah.
that's a good distinction. Great. Okay, so now that we have a view of different versions of the vision for Web3, I'd love your thoughts on examples of where Web3 has actually found product market fit today. And we've talked a bit about maybe stable coins. Is that, others might disagree, that's not a good example. Yeah, like what are some like tangible use cases that we can see today?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to just say stable coins, but stable coins, you know, like is definitely up there. I think outside of that, I've seen some examples, and I want to see more of this, honestly, just like verifiable credentials. I've seen some projects starting to do this because, you know, if you've completed a certain educational course or you've worked at a company or you've like basically you've done something. For example, like ETH Global does this now with hackathons. If you've won a certain tier, events that you've attended, kind of just like proof that you've done certain things.
Like POAPs?
Yeah, like POAP. Yeah, exactly, like POAPs. But then like actually doing things on top of those POAPs, not just saying like, okay, I like went to this event, but for example, now if you are a DevCon like now if you want to buy DevCon tickets now, you get a discount if you attended previous to DevCon, and all you have to do is connect your wallet. It just checks that you've attended before, that you've paid, you've put in that stake before, and already knows that you've done this, right? But the same thing goes for like things like education or verifying about things about your identity. This is honestly like, I know there's like certain security best practices about keeping a bunch of crypto wallets, but I honestly still like having like one wallet that this wallet is like me. I have other wallets for security reasons where I keep all my main assets, but there's like a one like identity wallet. This is myself, and it's important because like you have things on there that, you know, I see a lot of use cases that I think are still growing around. Okay, like we want to hire a developer, right? Can you show me that you've won a hackathon? Oh, now you don't just tell me you've won a hackathon, but I can just easily just check. I can look at your wallet and see that this has happened. And I see a lot of these actually crypto job boards coming up that are actually making use of this kind of on-chain information. And I think this is like a semi-product market fit. It hasn't quite hit there yet, but I just want to bring something up other than stable coins.
Yeah. I think one really cool thing is just off-chain voting on things for signaling.
Yeah.
I think in our space has really found good product market fit in the use of forums as a way of coordinating people towards kind
Like
of decision.
Snapshot, you mean?
Snapshot, yeah, totally. I think that's a really cool kind of step towards something as a kind of collective, like a product market fit, not for the world, but for our space. Definitely not for the world yet, but Discourse, the forum, is definitely used by lots of people. But yeah, I think the truth is that all that has found global product market fit that isn't kind of a self-reflected financial thing is the idea of transacting. And with the new innovations around chain abstraction, that's only going to get cleaner, that's only going to get easier. The issue is kind of something you were alluding to, which is you kind of define blockchains and you're like, but they have to be non-corruptible, they need to be basically decentralized. And I think that's where we're going to get into some issues where things are going to be totally censorable by governments, already are. And it's definitely scary to see, like entire networks going down for a day, and for people to not consider that to be a problem. For the types of stuff that we build, like we don't even consider that as an option. Obviously, we're thinking about it all the time, but to see people just do that and for people to just not give a shit is one of the most heartbreaking things to see time and time again with some of these networks. And I don't even need to name them. Everyone knows. I mean, everyone knows the networks that go down and which ones don't. You've all done the research by watching the news.
I mean, we can just say.
They're many that go
Are you saying Solana?
That's one of them. Okay, sure. That's definitely one.
But do you think that all blockchains need to have 100% stability and uptime? Because so the if like something like Bitcoin, maybe Ethereum, that have kind of consolidated themselves as very secure for big financial transactions, and maybe they want to become like the settlement layer of the future and be real for the future financial system. But maybe not all use cases need that level of uptime. I don't know.
Depends on the expectation of the application that wants to use the technology.
Right.
Everybody expects Bitcoin to take 10 to 30 minutes to get through, and that's fine. If you expect something to finalize in 6 seconds and it's 6 hours, that might be a problem. But I think it's about expectation setting,
Yep.
and I think you raise a good point there.
I mean, we're building public common goods, and all people deserve equal access to public common goods. Not just the rich people deserve highest level of availability and safety as guarantees. All of humanity deserves that. And we need to do better and not divert very important capital towards things that obviously will not be here in 20 years, when we know, based on what the last 10 years has shown us, where people will stand when times get tough, and what are true open source primitives that are helping push the world forward, and what are just side quests for people to make money.
I think you should.
Yeah,
I mean,
let me
you're
jump in
building on
there.
Solana, so I think you should.
So yes.
Never named Solana too. Like it's not them, it's everything.
So like a bit of our history, we launched a token on Ethereum in 2017. So we were like pretty early. We were the first large Web2 company to do that. We then moved to Stellar. We then did our own custom fork of Stellar, and then eventually moved to Solana. And again, first project in the world to move to Solana, right? Like now it's like a top whatever it is coin, but back then it was literally not even on CoinMarketCap. I think it depends on what you're optimizing for. I think if you're optimizing for building for consumers, which is where I come from, I'm a product person. I'm trying to deliver a product at scale for millions of regular people that improves their lives. If you want to do that, it's just not possible on other chains. Like for Ethereum, when we started on Ethereum, people were like, "What, you can't move off Ethereum? You started on Ethereum? You guys did a token sale on Ethereum? You can't move off Ethereum." I'm like, listen, if we want to give a little bit of cash to 1 million users just to get started, it's going to consume the entire chain for a month. And it's going to cost us like $50 million, something like that. It's like, that's never going to work for consumers. And so I think, yes, we need like equal access. We need these things to get better over time. But when it comes to a trade-off, one of our values, again, is look at all the options. When it comes to looking at all the options, it's like, well, Ethereum might have a story, but it will never work for my mom. So what's more important to me? Trying to build something for my mom or trying to maintain this pure story? And so that's where we got to Solana. It's like, yeah, maybe it's not going to get better. Maybe it's going to go down. But so far, we have been extremely happy with our decision. and our conviction that Solana is the right chain to build consumer apps, like high-scale, everyday person consumer apps, only continues to grow. And so I think that's where it really comes down to is like, what are you optimizing for? And I feel so many people in crypto are optimizing for a narrative versus for mainstream consumers. And just rounding it out with the question about product market fit, I think it depends how you define product market fit. You said, you know, we could build for our own community. But I think if we define it as building for the mainstream, then we should be honest with ourselves and say we have zero product market fit.
Zero.
Zero. Hold on, I'm not done. I'm not done.
Zero product market fit.
I'm saying that consumer for crypto for mainstream consumer has approximately zero product market fit. If the number one question I get from friends, family, you know, we're building a payments app. You guys, many of you used it today to buy drinks. Probably slickest payment experience in crypto, I would say. Many people have said that. The number one question we get though when we do our user testing, like, wow, that was really cool, but what can I do with it? That's the number one question, and I've asked that. Any product, any chain, my mom asked the question, but what can I do with it? What should I tell her?
Like close to $10 trillion in exchanged value of stablecoins is definitely product market fit. It's not something I'm proud of as our only product market fit, but also taking a step back, consider the implications of if you had built the first infrastructure to enable for an L2 on Ethereum, and that would have been a thing not just for your application, but for the entire world, instead of chasing a narrative with Solana. And I'm just trying to say, but you said that about Ethereum, it's chasing narratives, and I want to consider the implications of you had the opportunity to build the infrastructure that would have been used by everyone. And that could have been, and instead other people did that, other people built L2 infrastructure.
When my mom asks, what app should I use? What should I tell her?
Okay, so
Be very concrete.
okay. You guys stop talking about your moms. Listen, I witnessed a massive product market fit happen just last week. So this is one that's been talked about for a long time. Is gaming, right? Video gaming, and we've had some, like smoke and mirror shows, like Immutable, for example. I think they're launching like a game a day, 25 players, token pumps, token dumps, new game next day, right? There's a company called Mythical Games. It's led by John Linden, who is responsible for a lot of the Call of Duties. And he's closed a bunch of big gaming companies, and now he has a mobile company. One of their main games is called NFL Rivals. It has 4 million players, an NFL-branded game on the App Store, on Google Play Store. And little did the players know, all the items that they were winning in the game, the cards that they were building their teams with, these are all NFTs on a custodied wallet on the back end. Now, the back end, up until last week, was actually a proof of authority chain. So this is corruptible. It was all the validators were owned by Mythical Games. But just last week, they moved to a decentralized network. They became a roll-up on a decentralized network, and now these 4 million players are generating NFTs, and when they take custody of their wallets, I think 400,000 have taken custody, they are using a decentralized network. They're often the largest gaming blockchain by volume of NFTs, and I think the 4th largest blockchain frequently in the world by NFT volume. So it's not mass adoption, but it is 4 million players using blockchain, and not too worried about it.
I've seen quite a few of these games actually. Like, there's this one in the Startale ecosystem called Influence, I believe. They use some interesting stuff. They have they're built on Starknet, and with Argent they have this like session keys and stuff like that they use. And so it's pretty interesting because like they're like a huge portion of the game is actually on chain. But with the Argent wallet and some of those other changes, like almost none of that is actually happening. Like almost all that is abstracted away for them. So
how do you evaluate non-open source things? Sorry. How do you evaluate things like that when they're not open source?
You mean Argent or
just like general, like a lot of their chain abstraction stuff? I'm pretty sure it's not open source.
I mean, in terms of long-term usability, it's hard, because I mean, there could be a bug, you don't know what the audits were, and like all this other stuff. Yeah, I mean, I think all of that should be open source for sure. Is it sometimes difficult to do early on? I think yes. Look, I have a team and I have a runway and I have a certain amount of treasury, right? And so sometimes I'm going to have to make decisions to do things the way that I think will work and to ensure that our company continues to grow. We are, for example, open sourcing a bunch of our own stuff. All our data is very public and transparent, but we're not a decentralized system ourselves, right? I think there's a balance there, but I think it's also, I guess, about what your long-term goals are. Like, are you not open sourcing because you want to like keep this code and I don't know, maybe sell it off to another company later, or are you not open sourcing just because like maybe it's a bit of a predatory environment at the same time too, right? So you have to be kind of careful. But I do everything that's like a base layer, I think should become open source for sure.
Consider GPL licenses for this reason.
Yeah.
So I think what we're discussing here is that there's different degrees of product fit that crypto has achieved. If we look globally, there are 420 million of crypto holders. Mm-hmm. That's about 3% or less than 3% mm-hmm. of holders of crypto, just holders. That doesn't mean doing anything with your crypto worldwide. So I think, if we ask ourselves, has crypto reached global mass adoption? I think the answer is probably no. But I think that crypto has reached product market fit on specific, more local communities. And so maybe some games in some countries or some cities have reached fit, stable coins in some countries as well. Well, the case I know well is Argentina. I know the stablecoins have reached product market fit there. People sending remittances to the rest of other countries in Latin America. And yeah, I don't think there are many use cases, but probably games, stablecoins. I think NFTs maybe reached a tip of fit in the last cycle, but that has completely died down. So I think I don't know,
supply chains.
Sorry?
Supply chains, energy markets.
You think so?
These are active,
yeah?
large markets, yeah,
okay.
right now.
Real world assets.
But that's a
Nice.
real
We're
fit.
talking about current
It's
product
so
market fit.
tiny, real world assets.
$69 million.
What's that?
The people sold a piece of art for $69 million. That's
Yeah, so
That's what I think
artists. Yeah.
it all depends on how you define
Yeah.
the market in product market fit.
Yes.
Okay, if we define the market as speculative,
Mm-hmm.
then crypto has achieved amazing product market fit. Crypto is the largest casino in the world, attended by hundreds of millions of people. Okay? Again, I'm just being a bit contrarian here to spice it up. If you pull out speculative, if you said no crypto asset can ever go up in value, whether it's an NFT, a cryptocurrency, you name it, I think you'd see a lot of people leaving the casino.
Oh yeah, 100%.
For sure.
And so I think that's what I define product market fit,
Yes.
is people using these things with no intention to speculate on them. And that's my mission and my team's mission. What we're trying to do is get people to buy, to get it, to use it. And that's what I define as approximately no product market fit.
You know what else you would find if you could wave a wand and not have the value of things go up is you'd find a lot more industry and governments looking to adopt this technology as well, because it's legitimately useful if you want to have verifiable facts available digitally. So, I interviewed a crypto project a few months ago, and on their blockchain, they're recording the supply chain of major projects around the world, home hardware, Walmart. We don't talk about this as part of the speculation game, but this is happening, and it's valuable for them to have this information on chain and share it with each other, because it actually saves the whole industry money.
I think the supply chain story is just one specific example. It's talked a lot
Yeah,
about.
one example, yeah.
Just one example,
Yeah.
7 years ago. And when I talk to people about it, they're like, yes, the blockchain itself is immutable and trustless, but the people putting information into the blockchain is not. And so a lot of the supply chain projects that I was familiar with ultimately didn't go anywhere. As an example, because you're adding, yes, the database is trustless, but you have to trust the people saying this came from here, that came from there, and then like,
People who
wait,
attest.
and then all of a sudden we're back to a trusted system, right? How are we going to verify that the people who are trustworthy are actually trustworthy? So that's where I think really a financial system is the killer application for a trustless database, we'll call it.
Yeah.
Because there's no need for a testing. And this, I get back to USDC. Like, again, I think Coinbase is a wonderful, amazing company. It's so Circle, but it's not real crypto. Like, how can we say that, like, oh, it's trustless, except they can censor your transactions, they can flip the peg at any time, they can print more whenever they want. Like,
This is the key
But there are like completely trustless stable coins, right? Like LUSD, like very few.
they haven't worked yet, though.
No, they have. Like LUSD.
Yeah.
It's like one of the few ones. It's 100%. DAI is not. DAI is backed by USDC, USDC.
But that's
But it's backed by USDC.
but that's not what we're talking about right now.
The collateral for DAI is like 30% USDC and other.
This is a rhetoric fallacy, though, right? Because just hold on, just listen. Because
Taking questions from the audience.
yeah, just because blockchain exists doesn't mean everything it touches is trustless.
Right.
It just allows us to have trustless things. So if you are working in supply chain and you're two different companies that both want to know that factory inspector did go to this factory and attest that he did, it doesn't matter that he has to be trusted. That's already part of the business. What matters is that it can be proven that he said it, and that's valuable too. And it's not, it doesn't invalidate it just because there are other aspects of it that are still trusted.
I think that's a good point. Let's wrap up with. I think that's a good way to wrap up by saying what we're excited for will be built in the future.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think one of the big differences in the last 10 years in this industry is we went from really trying to think what different things could exist to how to integrate this in today's world. And I think both perspectives are super important, but they require each other to not be malicious in output, and that either one of those ways gets kind of the majority direction and mindshare in our space will definitely just go somewhere, unfortunately, that is probably not best for all participants. But yeah, like some of the things I would love for people to consider is what does a digital gallery look like in a real sense, where all the participants have, you know, revenue share, not just through an NFT, but through a VR gallery where, you know, people are enjoying and able to cater art through collective decisions and things of that nature. You know, consider a place like Palestine and how they're going to get money in and out of there, and what is required to create a localized economy in certain countries today versus what this infrastructure can allow them to do in the future. These are some of the things that, you know, I would love to talk to different people about and hear different people working on. But, you know, the goal here is to empower people to collaborate together, not just to create net positive value to the pre-existing rails of the world, but to create something better than has ever been before. And so I implore all of you to just do as much as you can towards going against the grain and making that a reality.
Lots of exciting tech being developed, but I think the most exciting thing over the next year is the attention. So speculation drives the world forward. It's the spear that gets us to where we want to be. And so this next phase of the liquidity cycle, where all this hype and insanity comes in, although it's a total circus and clown show, generally at the end of it, once the dust has settled, we have new liquidity in the market, we have new funding in the market, and a few of the projects that weren't completely bullshit can hobble forward and get this Web3 thing going.
Yeah. I think we were talking earlier about like how this is also like there's like the technical challenges, but then there's like the social like coordination challenges, and I think that a lot of the infra is there, like a lot of it has been built. There's a lot of still improvements being made, but what I want to see happening more, honestly, is just like people taking payments in crypto, like taking their salary in crypto, because then you're kind of there needs to be less people that don't need to fully onboard
If
into.
we can get salaries and pay taxes in crypto, then we can just have our own.
Yeah,
entity.
yeah. I was trying to onboard a couple of stores near me to crypto payments, and it was nothing. It wasn't an issue with the fact that the wallet's hard to download or like it's hard to get set up. It's the fact that their bank might flag them if they have cryptocurrency stuff associated to them, and it's the fact that they have. They don't know the clarity of like how to do their taxes now if they receive these
Right.
payments. So, but just encouraging more people to actually send people money. Like if you have friends or anybody else, you can literally, instead of having them go create an exchange account and do a KYC process and do all this other stuff, get them to like install a wallet and send them like 10 USDC or something. And now they're like, wait, I have money on chain now, right? And I didn't do any of those other supposedly complicated kind of things, right? And so I think, and then I think just getting more crypto in circulation is the most important thing. And then obviously, like what we'll do is we'll just try to keep everybody safe as as that crypto is
Nice.
circulating, right? So yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm similar to all of you. I feel like it's been many years of like getting the infrastructure to a place where you can actually start building something for mainstream consumers on top of it. To me, it feels like the early days of the web. Like I wasn't alive for it, but there was a long period of plain text on white backgrounds. And we look at the web today, and it powers all of these amazing mainstream consumer experiences. But there was 10 years where it was just like a bunch of academics, using it to post research papers. And so it feels like to me, we're just getting to that point, to use the web analogy, where we actually have broadband, we actually have AWS, where developers can actually start innovating on top of this new global platform that just does not exist in the legacy financial system. And I think we're going to see people build just like amazing things with that. And I think it's going to, everybody here, you're here because you're optimistic about crypto and what could be built with it, but I think even for us in this room, it's really going to surprise us the ultimate impact crypto has on society.
Awesome. Well, that was amazing. Thank you all, and thanks everyone.
Thank you.
We're going to take a little break. We'll start the next panel in about 20 minutes, presented by SheFi, and that'll be about building community with Web3. Thank you.
did you say you're doing right now? The fence? There's a fence. Yeah, I'm going to another dinner with the
Okay. Folks, if you could take your seats, we're going to get started and with the panel. And I would appreciate it if we could keep it a bit down. Have a seat. Come forward. This is a panel about community. Let's sit in the front. Okay. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Ria. I lead marketing here at ChainSafe. We're going to be talking about community building today. You all know how important it is to build community, specifically in Web3. You guys are here because of community today. So without further ado, we're just going to start with panel introductions. I've got Sophia, Shannon, TZ. If you guys could do your own intros. Go ahead.
Sure. Okay. We'll start. I'm Sophia. I work at ETH Global as an events manager. Prior to that, I actually was at ChainSafe as their experiential marketing lead. And then prior to that, I also was doing events at ChainSafe. I also am one of the co-organizers of DeFi Toronto, which is one of the largest communities in Toronto. I'm sure some of you guys have been to our events. And yeah, before that, fun fact, I used to be a dental hygienist. So that was a lifetime ago. And now my journey is into Web3. So yeah, pass on to you, Shannon.
Hey, I'm Shannon. I've been with LivePure for the last 3 years. LivePure is a decentralized video infrastructure protocol. Started off as head of community and governance, and I've been doing ecosystem growth there for the last couple of years. Got into the Web3 space actually doing ETH Global hackathons and being part of the ETH Global community. Before that, I actually worked at Mars many, many years ago.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Hi everyone, my name is TZ. I'm the CMO at Zverse, one of the leading games built on Arbitrum. And I got into the space a few years ago, starting with NFTs, trading that, and then also collaborating with DAOs.
Awesome. So today here on this panel, we have a few different perspectives. We've got events, we've got an ecosystem, we've got games. So I'm really curious to find out, how do you folks define community? Let's establish the baseline from there. Sophia?
Yeah. So I think community depends on which perspective you're looking at, but to me, community is basically just bringing people together who have shared values, shared goals, and bringing them into a network where you basically have a shared voice or your own voice, somewhere to speak, a platform, and also, a way where you have the power to contribute, right? Community is really different depending on which angle you're looking at it, I'd say, but it's also not just about knowledge sharing, it's about building something together that's bigger than just the sum of its own parts. So if you think about it, community, hype is not community, right? So people get that confused. There's a lot of large companies out there that basically are massive scale, but they actually don't have a community. And I think that's because, it's not just what you can give to your users, it's what your users can give to each other. So with that, it's also really important for a community to have a manifesto, right? Which is something that your community can get behind, that can anchor to, I would say. So it's bringing people together almost, especially in Web3 context, where you're moving and you're driving something forward and you're pushing that into a bigger space, right? And within Web3, the community is basically the backbone of driving decentralized innovation. So that's what I would say community is to me.
Yeah, I guess I think about what a community is not. And I think when community often gets discussed in terms of the marketing function or marketing departments, community is not an audience. An audience to me is a group that's really passive. They're not really engaging with you, whereas a community for me is defined by active participation, engagement, and commitment. These are people who are sticking around to be part of something on an ongoing basis. And I think, all of the things around shared values, culture are what really motivate that. But I think for me, it really is, people who are committed and loyal to a shared set of values and experiences.
From a gaming perspective, when you look at a community, it's a group of people who have a shared passion or love for that game. So whether it's a product, a platform, a DeFi protocol, people with shared values and a mission, or just a shared love of a certain product or game, I think that's the main thing. Like a desire to play or a love for a game is what kind of unites that group of people.
So something I'm hearing here is like you folks did a great job at defining what a community is, but also looking at your answer was around what makes a successful community, right? Mm-hmm. And given that, what are some good examples of communities that you've seen in Web3 that are not audience or networks? And I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because I think people really do mistake like a network as opposed to a community.
Yeah.
So what are some good examples that you've seen?
Yeah, I would say I probably have two. So, so the first one for me would be Gitcoin is a great example of a community. Gitcoin's like an open source platform, and it allows basically people to, it empowers them to build and also fund things that are important to them, right? So it's a community of people who are looking to get funding for projects or whatever they're building. Gitcoin has like a really big active global community in a sense that it's actually, globally having people that are constantly funding different projects, right? And that's really hard to have. With Gitcoin also, like there was I would say like a pioneer in the concept of public goods funding. So in that sense, like it's really important to have what they're doing make a huge impact with what we're doing in Web3. And then with that, Gitcoin has their their grants program as well. And being from DeFi Toronto, we actually benefited from one of their grants programs. So Gitcoin has like quadratic funding, which basically means you can make small contributions but still make a really big impact. And DeFi Toronto, we were part of round 19 for Gitcoin's Web3 community initiatives. So I think Gitcoin's a great example because it actually brings back the power to the community to fund things that they think are important, right? So I would say that's number one. Number two would probably be a little biased here, but probably the Ethereum ecosystem itself. Like when you think about Ethereum, it's literally like comprised of developers, builders, educators, app users. Like Ethereum itself is like exemplifies what it means to be have innovation, to be inclusive, to be open source, and then also to be very resilient within what's been happening all throughout Web3. So here's the bias that comes in. So ETH Global, actually, we have our own really large network of builders all across the world that really funds to the Ethereum ecosystem, right? So you come to a hackathon and you get to talk to other people about your ideas, you get to talk to them about what you're building, and also building really cool shit, but also you get to build long-lasting friendships, right? Things that you're gonna bring back to you, and that's a sense of community in itself, right? So if you think about it, there's so many great projects that came out of ETH Global as well. There's like 1inch, there's CryptoKitties, there's Gearbox, there's Push Protocol. So again, like I said, I'm a little biased, but I would say those are probably my top two communities. Yeah.
I guess some of the top characteristics when I think of, identifying good communities, I think sense of belonging is obviously like the most important one. And I think other ways to kind of look at like strong sense of belonging, it's like, do people care about new members that join the community? I think you can tell pretty quickly if there's a healthy and strong community when new members join. Are other people, just because they're excited to have new people there, willing to help, and they're not just getting paid to kind of like be mods or help onboard people. I think you can, really judge how caring a community is by that. I think the best communities are also super innovative. You can also just tell there's a lot of stuff happening in really strong communities where there's a really strong collaborative culture. That's probably because there is a high degree of trust. I think communities that have a lot of diversity in them also tend to be more innovative and collaborative because you have people with lots of different skill sets contributing to those projects. And I think with those measures, I do agree. I think the Ethereum community is, probably one of the most resilient and certainly innovative, and, different corners have lots of caring people onboarding it. It's kind of like hard to put your finger on the Ethereum community today, I think. I think the Solana ecosystem's actually been also really great at really fostering a culture and shared values just around speed and just building stuff, and I have seen a lot of encouragement and help for new people onboarding. I think there's lots of organic communities that have formed to help others get involved, like the Solana women's community's been active for a long time. I mean, I'm sure there are infinite other communities to point to, but for me those are the kind of high level metrics.
Got it.
Mm-hmm. Adding on to what you said, Shannon, about characteristics, I think another thing is organic growth. So how are you onboarding these new users, these new community members, while also retaining your old users, retaining interest, and then also not really losing the ethos and mission that you initially onboarded everybody with? I think that one NFT project that really stands out to me in terms of community is Pudgy Penguins. So I think it's how can you as a community, face market downturns, face internal coups and struggles and still come up on top. So I think one component of it is organic growth and retention, and then another of it is resiliency and also the desire to move forward as a group.
Okay, I have another question here. We're going to talk about, when we were gathering earlier, all the speakers, we were talking about events and community. So events are such an integral part of Web3 community building, or just community building in general. But as we've seen time and again, when we go to these bigger events, whether it's Ethereum events or you're going to DEF CON, there's so many side events. And usually you will see 2 or 3 people attending those side events. I know, Shannon, you said you had some hot takes on this, so I'm very curious about your perspective on how we can make that better.
Yeah, I mean, if you just look at ECC, how many people went to ECC? Okay. You probably, if you weren't there, maybe heard some memes about it. But basically, there were hundreds of side events. No one was actually going to the main ECC venue, and all of the events probably had about, just 20% attendance in terms of who signed up. So I think, to me, the really interesting insight there is it's very hard to get mind share and heart share when there's so much crowded activity happening in one particular space. And I think, you really have to ask yourself, what is my project about? Who is the specific group of people and interests that, we're trying to appeal to, and really create your own lane, and probably don't look to plan a side event around ECC because you're probably not going to get huge attendance there, but maybe off the beaten track at a different time in the calendar. Where can you be in the world that there's a regional concentration of people who are active in your community, or where you have budget to travel to and create some organic and unique momentum yourself? I think it's really important to not try and compete with large events where there's just so many different events happening, and you really have to ask yourself, what's unique to my community? What are unique moments and events where we know we can carve out a lane for ourselves? And just to follow up on that, I mean, the other cost of that is it can become really expensive when you are trying to, build your own circuit, and I think that becomes not super scalable pretty quickly. And so it also underscores the importance of making sure that you can identify ambassadors in different parts of the world, identify ambassadors in different segments that might overlap with yours. Just as a concrete example for LivePeer, we build open source video SaaS software on top of our decentralized infrastructure network. So we learned pretty quickly that there's a broader global open source developer community of people using open source video media software. Those are really nice aligned adjacent communities that are outside the main crypto bubble, where you can actually meet a lot of new people and help onboard them. So I think there are lots of different projects, gaming, creator projects. There's just so many different ways to start to build alliances with communities that are not so deeply entrenched in the same conversation, same people going to the same events all the time.
Yeah, 100%. Sophia, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with what Shannon's saying.
Louder?
For sure. Louder, yeah. I definitely what Shannon's saying for sure, right? Like, especially when you are going to like the ECCs, you know, and large conferences like that, you are going to have a lot of side events. But I think also at this point, like, it's really important, you know, one aspect of community is like, how can you promote community retention? Mm-hmm. So you know you're going to put on an event, right? And you're going to have your community come out there. So at that point, you know, it's not like your community is going to be signing up to like 50 other events at this point. You know that they're going to be loyal to you in that way, and they're going to come out and they want to hear you speak. And the way that you do that is by putting on an event that has amazing speakers, it's curated, it's not like just open to anyone, but still is inclusive for everyone, if that makes sense.
Explain further.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, like I think it's just basically like, you know, having a curated list of speakers that speaks to everyone, right? So in a way that like you can still relate, but it's something new, it's something innovative, it's something fresh, and it's something that's everyone else is not doing.
Yeah. I think sometimes I do agree with that perspective, but I think sometimes you can't be everything to everyone. So I think
That's right.
having, you know, to just build on that, I feel like something I've seen with SheFi events and, you know, specifically is I really enjoy going to the summits, and I feel that a great effort has been made into curating it for women and making it a very safe and inclusive space. And that, you know, the event selling out speaks volumes to that mission and the movement that they're trying to build. So one of the things that I believe is really, really important for community building, which I've gleaned from what all of you are saying, it's like, oh my God, I'm adding my own perspective. I think great communities are built around a movement. You gotta like really figure out what is the movement that you're trying to build. Like even with product communities, it's the same. Which leads me to the next question. One thing is like communities like ETH Global, where you have events and you know you've got people who are enthusiastic about the ecosystem, they want to build things together, right? But then there's communities for products. How are they, and this is specifically asking you, Shannon, like what are some of the challenges in early days of building live peers community, right? When you're trying to market a product or you know an offering rather than organic community, grassroots community. Sorry.
I mean, LivePeer is a marketplace for video compute. So we have the supply and demand side of the network. The token launched in 2017. And so there was an immediate community that was bootstrapped around that. And that was really we call it the supply side of the network, the people providing their GPUs to run nodes on the network. When I joined LivePeer 3 years ago, we didn't really have a demand side on the community, and that was a community of developers who were using our SaaS product that we built, the APIs for, you know, adding live streaming or video on demand to your applications. And I think getting that started organically, you know, looking back, it was a lot of going to events and building partnerships with other projects who we knew were going to introduce us to developers who, you know, would be interested in exploring what Web3 video meant, what on-chain video might mean. We spent a lot of time at ETH Global, my first year and a half, and that was a really important strategy in terms of being in different places around the world. We were online a lot, and it was really trying to get more Web3 developers who were building apps but weren't necessarily thinking about video. And then also just, as I mentioned earlier, like being physically present in different places. I also spent a lot of time going to different cities, figuring out who was in, you know, different regions. Tokyo, spent a lot of time in South America, like looking for people who were interested in video as an area of interest. And that, again, it really helped to differentiate LivePeer from a lot of other projects because, you know, our mission is the future of video. And if you are interested in video, whether you like to watch video, whether you like to create video, whether you like to edit video, whether you like to, you know, develop video applications, I think it's a very inclusive mission. And I think that's also really important when you try and carve out a niche for yourself and you're trying to create safe and inclusive spaces, you do want to craft your narrative and create, you know, a mission and a theme that's going to bring a lot of people on board. Jesse Pollock at Base, I think, is just like crushing the kind of inclusive vision of bringing the world on chain right now. I think he's probably the best person in the space that's just like galvanizing people around, like, who doesn't want to bring the world on chain? You will find a way to contribute there, and it's not just technical contributions. And I actually gave a keynote at ETH Global's Super Hacks a little over a week ago, talking about the importance of valuing non-coding contributions. I think it's it's a slippery slope when you start to describe people as technical or non-technical. I don't code, but I consider myself quite technically literate. I have a really good understanding of the Web3 technology stack, where LivePeer and other projects fit within that. I think, you know, community building, project management, there's just so many different things that we all know that make projects work. And so when you also think about creating inclusivity and like building a big community, I think that was also a really important part of the strategy at LivePeer, was like, it's not just, you know, the coders or the node operators, it's like the rest of the contributors to your ecosystem who are gonna, you know, make sure there's valuable experiences for others to be part of.
That makes a lot of sense. TZ, your perspective on this? Like, what were some of the what are some good things that are happening on Zverse, and what are some of the challenges of building a community for a game?
I would say one of probably the biggest that comes to mind is how to include different people geographically. So we have a large base in Asia and also in Europe. A lot of our players are in Asia and Europe, and then also a few in North America as well. And so, number one, of course, time zone differences. When we have these live events in the game and we're doing airdrops or we're doing some kind of like NFT sales, how do we, you know, coordinate accordingly for people living in different time zones? But then the other thing is that there's really different cultures. For example, well, number one is like, how do we market linguistically wise that appeals to both like Asian communities and also English speaking communities. And so that is a set of challenges when you're building a product or a community worldwide. And in terms of the positives, it's really just something beautiful when you see so many people from around the world coming together to play your game, to be on your product, or to, you know, be within your community.
Okay, thank you for that. Let's go back to the start. You mentioned something about hype is not community. How do you measure ROI on your community, or how have you done it in the past? We can start with you, TZ.
First thing that comes to mind is probably value generation. And when you think of value, you probably think first thing is financial generation. How does your community contribute financially? So whether it's token sales, NFT sales, things like that. But we can also think of it in terms of innovation. So how are your members innovating within your own community or within the space in general? So within gaming, or whether it be in DeFi or infrastructure, and what kind of like content are they generating? Is it like organic? Is it original? And is it of value and like in terms of quality, not just quantity? Let me think. Another thing is probably in terms of just retention. Like, I think a big thing of it is retention as well.
Mm-hmm. How do you ensure retention? How have you done that in, you know, in the past or now?
So with us, we look at wallets. So we look at overall active wallets. We have around 20,000 active wallets and over 1 million transactions. And so we look at that, and it's just on-chain activity. So, I mean, it's very numbers based. We can see, okay, this wallet or this user, this player has been with us for the last 3 years. We can see that they're, you know, popping in every now and then, or we see new wallets that are coming in like every few times and within 1 day. So we can measure that through retention.
Do you want to go?
Well, yeah, sure.
just like, backing what Susie said too, like, I think ROI is not really measured, like, you don't really need to measure it necessarily based on like financial returns, right? So, like, with that being said, I think community is really just about like, what kind of great interactions are you getting in terms of intellectual, connections? Is your community having fun? Does your community trust you? Does your community want to stay there? Like we talked about retention, right? Like, and one of your questions was, how do you measure retention, or how do you ensure that, your community still wants to be where you are and still is, believing in what you're doing? And I think that is really important at ETH Global. For instance, like, we have people that come to multiple hackathons that have for years, will follow us wherever we are. We also listen to our community. So if you're giving us feedback, we really try to implement it. Our team is very small. We have like a 14-person team. Our events team is actually only 5 people. So we're very nimble, but we really try to make actionable outcomes in quick, right? Like, Web3 moves fast, we move faster. So I think with that, I think in a way you can measure it. Objectively, you can measure, ROI in terms of how many active contributors do you have, how many great interactions are you having, like, anything along that sense. I feel like you can measure it, but in the end, I don't think it's really about financial returns.
Yeah, in BD speak, and I know BD's had a really rough week in crypto, but you think of really long lead times. I think really good communities are when you host events or you put on activations that you just want to bring people in. You're not immediately trying to convert them or sell them on something necessarily, but you just really want them to be part of an experience and show up and contribute their energy. And I think, and I've seen this at LivePeer, it takes a year, maybe a year and a half, but invariably someone who's stuck around in your community, something will click for them and they'll be like, oh wow, I really want to start my startup now and I'm going to build on LivePeer. I think that nurturing people who want to like share and give their time to your project and making sure that, they do feel welcome, that you're always giving them, experiences, whether that's, Discord events or like IRL events where they live, cool opportunities to make them feel like they belong to something. I think that will eventually pay off. It just, it does take some time, but I have seen, now being with the project for 3 years, that the payoffs can be pretty big if you, take care of your people.
100%. And speaking of community, we're going to open to audience Q&A. I know that the camera can't see you and I can't look at the camera, so it's so bright. But yeah. Okay, I can repeat the questions for sure. Anyone?
I was wondering if you find open source as kind of be a pillar of community building within blockchain. I know that's kind of been like in the news recently, developments in the living space, but I don't really hear too much about it in blockchain. So I'm curious what your thoughts on that.
So open source as a pillar for community building. Thoughts on that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's critical. I think most of the credible, strongest projects in crypto are all open source. I think that's a big reason why most of us are in Web3 is because we're building open source technology. And when you have an entire ecosystem that is building open source tech, what that does is create opportunities for composability, for collaboration between those technologies. When you realize you can, see the code of something and look at how that might fit with your own stack, I think that is, a huge reason why this space continues to grow so fast, and just why the innovation in this space is so fast, unlike any other technology industry, just because I actually don't have stats on this, but the vast majority of projects that I know are certainly open source.
Yeah, I feel, I'm just going to add one thing here. It's like, I feel that open source is so, it's the heart of community building, right? Mm-hmm. And it is so well placed to, like, the whole crux of community building is creating value before you ask for value, and open source does that just automatically, mm-hmm. But the virtue of like how it is set up. But Sophia, your comments.
No, yeah, I mean, honestly, I 100% agree, right? Like, especially at a time like at ChainSafe, right? Like ChainSafe's an open source, like we do a lot of things contribute to the ecosystem that's open source, right? And it is definitely like a pillar of, I would say, the Web3 community for sure, to answer your question. Yeah. There's a lot of things around open source and decentralization that I think go hand in hand when we're talking about Web3 communities.
Just a follow-up question to that. I feel like in the blockchain space, the opportunity to grow your own capital is such a big thing. So do you think that kind of conflicts almost with like the open source push? If that makes sense, just because people don't necessarily prioritize things or
Oh, interesting. So you think that there's a disincentive to commercialize, or like it's harder to be profitable if you're not open source?
Well, I'm just curious if that makes sense. Or have you recognized that, or do you think people kind of prioritize the development of technology?
So I mean, I'll speak to LivePeer, I guess. So we've commercialized an open source SaaS product, and it's hard to like generate a lot of profit. But I think it's more for us a marketing challenge than it is like the fact that someone could go look at our code and and copy that. There are unique, I think, economic models that are possible when you have protocols that provide inflationary funding rewards for different projects, like the Optimism retroactive public goods funding and how the super chain is now structured. So any chain that's built on the Optimism stack, I think it's 10 or 15% of all of their fees go back to funding public goods on projects building on the super chain. So I think there's a lot of, I'm not sure I've seen a lot of evidence that you can't be profitable just because you're open source. I think it just requires like more creative marketing for you to, and probably like product development, just kind of like understanding your users. And again, I think the community building that's part of creating open source technology is just, you have a bias to be open and transparent. And I think that's just like more welcoming to other people who want to come in and build on top of your project. And that in itself can be a moat for a lot of businesses.
Thank you. Are you guys open source? Or question?
Yeah, so actually just to follow up on the point about grants.
Yeah.
I'm just curious if, like, what role has grants played in, like, building your perspective, like, your communities? And if there's any, like, grants mechanism that you are a fan of, for example, like the retroactive public goods funding that you mentioned. Yeah, so just curious. Thanks.
Yeah, like for Gitcoin is honestly like one of the best, one of the best, should probably not say that, but they're one of the greatest places, I would say, that's like open source for grant funding, right? Like I said, they're a pioneer in in public goods funding. So the grant program's great. I think there's a lot of communities that actually do offer grant programs as well, right? So like for instance, there's like one community is World of Women. I don't know if you've heard about that NFT project, right? So like they actually partner with like underprivileged communities to then do grants and like give grants for female founder businesses. So I think there's a lot of grants out there that you can definitely look into depending on what you're doing. Like I said, for us, we use Gitcoin for DeFi Toronto, but there's a lot of things out there, and I think it depends on what you're building for sure.
Yeah, I think if you're a project that's launched a token and you're not allocating a portion of that to fund builders in your ecosystem through grants or whatever, you're like NGMI. Like it's, I think, such a critical part of bootstrapping ecosystems from the ground up is being able to provide support to builders who want to take a risk on your tech, to try new things, being able to prove that there is like, disruptive, novel stuff happening in your ecosystem. I do think it's really important to incentivize that through grants. And it is important, though, to like transition and have supports available to builders who do want to, create their own startups on top of your protocol. I think that can be, a bit challenging to, decide when to turn off the tap at what stage of a product or at what stage of a builder's journey you're going to say no. At this point, you actually need to go out and either find users and make money or go out and find investors who will give you private capital to continue to grow. But I think in terms of getting people started, grants are absolutely critical.
I think Arbitrum gaming has been really good recently because I think it was a few months ago where Arbitrum, they launched over $1 million in terms of funding for Web3 games on Arbitrum. So with that, it's almost like it was promoting games to collaborate and cross-pollinate communities. And it was, instead of everybody competing for a piece of the pie, it was as if the pie grew bigger and everybody got a larger piece.
Thank you. We've got a question here.
I'm going to ask, a lot of times our communities and projects become more or less an echo chamber of the same ideas and concepts being brought forward. How can you expect teams to mobilize their communities to onboard new users, and what are some examples from your experience?
So the question is, a lot of times communities can become echo chambers, and how do we ensure adoption and stop that from happening, and what are some good examples of that?
I kind of mentioned this earlier, but in thinking about LivePeer's growth strategy, it was really like investigating what are adjacent communities that have an overlap with our vision for the future, which is disruptive video tech. And whatever that question is, for whatever your North Star mission is, I think just ask yourself, who might be interested in this that I'm not speaking with? And for us, it was realizing that, there was this global open source media and video developer community, getting to be part of that. For LivePeer, because we are a deep and decentralized infrastructure network, starting with transcoding, it just made total sense for us to add AI compute to the LivePeer network, which we did earlier this year, immediately starting to be part of the AI developer community. You mentioned that open source has been a really critical part of the growth and innovation in the AI sector. I mean, that's because all of the foundation models are open source, and that's where all of the development's been happening. So, being part of that community as well. I would just, reflect critically on what your mission is and go explore who might want to be part of that.
And part of it is innovation. I 100% agree with that. Part of it is also communities gather around rituals, and sometimes there are some rituals that no longer work. So you have to talk to your community and see what's going to work for them, what's not going to work for them, and also coming back to the mission, who are you, especially in a business kind of sense, where you're building a product, who are you targeting to? Go to places where those people are and go and that's the crux of community building, right? Mm-hmm. Talk to them. So I will give an example. We obviously at ChainSafe, we have all our regular channels, organic channels and all that stuff. But for Web3JS currently, which is a public good, we have launched an ambassador program, and the amount of feedback and community building we've done just through that single initiative is amazing, if I may say so myself. And that's not something like an ambassador program. We've done different versions of the ambassadors program, but this is the one that works for this particular thing. So I think sometimes we get caught up in this thing that we have to try this one ritual over and over again. Maybe events are just not the thing where your community gathers, right? And the goal shouldn't always be to gather them at your thing, as Shannon was saying earlier. Go to where your community is. And that's how it doesn't become stale, it becomes more inclusive. You're including people from outside of your little channel as well.
Yeah, and I think it also goes without saying, look geographically where you are. Echo chambers can happen so often when you're just literally, talking to the same people in New York or LA or, Toronto. Where in the world could you be? Where in the world might there be people who could be inspired by what you're doing? Help them grow regionally. I think we need to be decentralized regionally and geographically as much as we do compute and technology wise.
Mm-hmm. One last question. We'll take one more. Yes. Okay.
Exclusivity versus inclusivity. So how, I know Web3 as a theme supports inclusivity, but community building many times is successful because of exclusivity. So
how much should that be prioritized? I mean, it's project dependent and what we're trying to get out of the community, what you're trying to get the community to do. But how important is it as an ethos and even as just from a project perspective to prioritize exclusivity in communities?
Inclusivity, I'm just going to repeat the question, is inclusivity versus exclusivity in community building? And how important is exclusivity when it comes to community building?
Absolutely.
Okay.
There's Web3, just for context, there's Web3 communities that have popped up just because they're super exclusive to a specific segment and cater to a specific segment. Things like the application process, a tougher onboarding, you could say, versus, there's projects that typically experience the onboarding process and just be a part of their community very quickly.
I think it probably depends what you're trying to build. Like if you're trying to create a product that is offering a really exclusive experience, you're trying to price that at a price point where you can justify that, sure. I think if you're building infrastructure projects, that's not a very winning strategy. Like you can just, again, think of Base. Like Jesse Pollock's message is Base is for everyone. Bring the world on chain. Everyone can be part of that. I think, for me, that's what resonates being in an open source technology ecosystem, is that it is entirely inclusive and transparent, and there's no barriers to entry. I think you can think about layering on, token gated experiences or exclusive experiences, points, for people who in your community who are, giving more value. I think that can make sense, but I think if you're trying to build big technology projects, you don't want to create any barriers for people to come in.
Yeah, I agree. It's going back to what I was saying also before, which is hype is not community. So sometimes when these communities come out, right, and they're building or they're coming out with it's exclusive, you can only get this token if you're doing X, Y, and Z or whatever it is. I mean, it depends on, and that could be great for them, but it's just not for everyone, right? And it depends, like what Shannon was saying, what are you trying to build? What kind of product are you trying to build? And for you, what kind of community do you want to be part of, right? So I think it really just depends. Yeah.
I think in Web3 gaming, a lot of it is financial, barriers. So I think when you're building a game and if you're building a product, you have to keep in mind that there will be different price points where people will be excluded. And that's just kind of the way of the world, but you have to include, you have to build a product or build a game where anyone can play, but the free version is just as fun as the paid version. And there's incentive to, play for free and even greater incentive to pay to play.
Okay. Thank you so much, everyone, and thank you to our panelists. There is, a round of applause. There is going to be one more panel at, I guess we'll start around 5:15 now. That's going to be on the state of crypto in Canada. Please stick around, and we'll see you later. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Okay, last panel of the day. Okay, so again, I'm Cami Russo. I'm the founder of the Defiant, the best source of information for DeFi, Web3, crypto news. Yes. Everyone subscribe. And we'll be talking about the crypto and blockchain community and industry in Canada. I'm personally very, very curious about this panel. I know that there's a huge community here. A lot of the industry's biggest companies started here. But before we get to the questions, I'll let panelists introduce themselves.
Sure. I can start. Everyone, my name is Aleem. I am a product lead at Delve. Delve is kind of a DeFi R&D shop focused on governance systems, new protocol development. We recently launched Hyperdrive, which is a protocol for fixed and variable yields to Ethereum mainnet just about a month ago. We're working on a new fixed rate Borer product coming up. And I also am one of the co-founders of DeFi Toronto, which is one of the larger communities here in Toronto and in Canada. We've been running events for almost 5 years now, well before DeFi Summer. And yeah, we're posting them monthly, so excited for the next one in September.
Nice.
My name is Morva Rohani. I'm the Executive Director of the Canadian Web3 Council. We're an industry association for crypto and blockchain companies in Canada. We do tend to, and basically we represent the interests of those companies to governments and regulators and the general public. And our members include ChainSafe, who are hosting us today, Wealthsimple Crypto, Coinbase, Kraken, a lot of exchanges, but other companies as well. And yeah, our main mission is to make sure we get regulations right in Canada, which I think is top of mind for a lot of people right now, and it should be top of mind for you if it's not top of mind for you. So I hope to bring that perspective to this conversation.
Hi everyone, my name is Mike Nasser. I'm co-founder at SatStreet. I'm also an advisor on the Round 13 Digital Asset Fund. SatStreet is a digital asset trading desk. We work with accredited investors and above, focusing on delivering best-in-class service and execution capabilities. And on the Round 13 side, we look to support companies and teams building within the Web3 space in Canada, whereas our I guess is close to our hearts. But we also invest globally as well. So yeah, nice to be here.
All right. Hey, everybody. My name is Matt Switzer. I am with Toronto Global. We are a government agency that attracts and supports global companies to expand and do business here in Toronto. So very unique perspectives I think we'll get from this panel. But the work that I do is to talk with companies and get them to understand the opportunities that are here of hiring and growing their business in Toronto versus anywhere else. And over the past few years, been working with a lot of blockchain crypto companies as they've looked at our market, some expanded here, and then I've heard the other side of the stories as well. But I'm excited to talk today. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, thanks everyone. Okay, so tying back to what I was saying before about how in Canada there is such a a big and growing crypto community. What is it about Canada, do you think, that drives blockchain innovation and innovators here?
Sure, so like what about Canada?
Yeah, like what are the drivers?
Okay, I think, yeah, I guess I can kick it off. I think one of the things is, there's like pedigree here. Like we've got this amazing community of founders going back to 2013, 2014, 2015, even around the time of Ethereum. And, you kind of mentioned there's been a lot of projects that have been founded in Canada, like Ethereum, Cosmos, including Tendermint, the consensus algorithm. There's Layer 0, Flow blockchain. I could go on. And I think a lot of those original founders and builders have gone on to build other things or to fund additional projects. So we've got this kind of positive knock-on effect that's kind of, been pervasive across the Canadian ecosystem. So I think that is one aspect of it. And then another is Canada's known for having some of the best technical talent in the world, right? We have some of the best engineering, computer science schools, and just general focus on technology. So we've got this huge amount of young technical talent that's entering the workforce every single year, and a lot of them, because they're exposed to blockchain or Web3 through university clubs and whatnot, are kind of entering, in a Web3 role as their first real career experience. So we have a lot of talent, I think, in Canada as well that's really bolstering the whole ecosystem.
Nice.
I agree with everything Aline said, and I think one thing about Canada with tech in general, not just Web3, is we're very good at incubating ideas and training people to come up with ideas. Like our university ecosystem is, I think, set up well for that. We have a lot of research funding that flows through, and we do have a pretty good startup ecosystem in terms of like government support for startups. I mean, it can be difficult to navigate, but at the same time, I do think we invest more than our neighbors south of the border. And so we're good at incubating those ideas, and we're good at helping people get to a place where they're like, okay, I feel supported as an entrepreneur. Our issue, and I know that wasn't part of your question, but our issue really is taking those ideas to the next level. How do we scale a business in Canada? And oftentimes what happens is people end up going to countries with more capital and with bigger markets. So, and I think Web3 community and Web3 startups kind of fall under the same category of that.
Yeah, it's tough to add because I agree with both of them and was going to say exactly the same thing that Aleem just said. So what else? I don't even know what else I can add to that. I mean, so running a trading desk and focusing on like higher net worth individuals and businesses from my perspective, and I think there are stats to back it up. Canada is one of the richest countries in terms of crypto wealth on an individual basis. So, we see it firsthand, and along with what Aleem said, we have some of the earliest communities here in crypto, and it helps that, Ethereum was built within an hour away from here, and it has a lot of, it's kept a lot of value within Canada, and, value comes interest, and we've just sort of grown from there. But also agree with Morva, it's about keeping that here and moving things forward.
So this is how I sell and promote Toronto to international executives when they want to know why Toronto. And talent, yes, but it's our ability to grow, attract, and retain talent. And why those three things matter? Well, you grow talent through the strong educational system that's here. Sure, we see it every day, but University of Toronto, University of Waterloo, they're some of the best schools in the world, and that's key. When I say ability to attract talent, it's our open immigration policies that have brought a lot of great talent here. Right now, there's about 80,000 international students in Ontario's colleges and universities. Most of these folks are going to want to stay. This is that talent pipeline that companies can kind of lean on when they want to grow. And you look at, there's only so many smart people in the world, so why not create programs to attract and incentivize them to be here and to stay here? And then when I say we do a great job of retaining talent, well, it's the quality of life. Toronto is consistently ranked as one of the top 10 and any markers when it comes to livability standards around the world. So those are key reasons why you have the talent here. Then you want to add on the tech ecosystem. We're the third largest in North America, and we're the second largest financial services sector in North America. So when you have that type of knowledge and skills that are here, it's going to breed a really strong ecosystem within the blockchain, crypto, and Web3 space.
Awesome. I'd like to spend some time talking about the regulatory framework in Canada for crypto. Obviously, that's a huge pillar for any ecosystem. So if you could just give a brief overview of what that looks like. Would you consider Canada to be crypto friendly or not? What's the status of crypto as securities or not? Tax regime, that sort of thing. Just like an overview.
Do you want me to start?
Yes.
Okay, sure.
You're more suited.
We're a federalist country, so there's the federal aspect of it, and then there's a provincial aspect of it. At the provincial level, that's where the securities regime comes in, because we're unique in that we have securities regulators in every province. I don't think that's the thing in the rest of the world. We're lucky to have 13 different perspectives on securities regulations. And so that securities regime right now oversees crypto trading platforms, rules around like investment, for instance, and a whole host of other things. I think the jury's still out on whether or not Bitcoin or Ethereum or ETH or a whole host of other crypto assets are securities or not. There's some questions about that right now, especially with regards to certain digital assets. But what's happened in the past few years is securities regulators have come up with what I think in their mind is an interim regime that has lasted for several years. Is there's no real rulemaking, there's just guidance, but then people have to comply. And so I think, in my experience, at least in Canada, Canadian policy making and rulemaking tends to kind of follow what our trading partners do. And because of Quadriga, our regulators were forced to come to the table first, but they're like, we don't know what to do because the US hasn't figured this out yet, the European Union hasn't figured this out yet. So we're gonna come up with some interim arrangement until all of that is resolved elsewhere, and then we'll figure out what to do with it. And that is still the state of affairs today for a lot of things. And then at the federal level, like money laundering and fraud prevention, that's more at the federal level. Taxes is also at the federal level, and I think there are questions as to what else falls under federal jurisdiction. For instance, anything that's a payment probably falls under federal jurisdiction. And in terms of where we measure up right now, I would say we're somewhere in the middle. So because if you ask like a US-based crypto trading platform right now, they'll say Canada is great because we have somewhere to register and we have somewhere to be regulated. Whereas right now they're in a battle to even be able to do that with the Securities Exchange Commission. But if you ask like a local Canadian crypto trading platform, they'll be like, well, this isn't great and it's a lot of money for compliance and the operations are extensive and the legal implications are complex and there's a lot of risk and the insurance isn't great. And so what I always say from my perspective is it's not necessarily how you measure up with your competitors on the global landscape in terms of exactly where you're at. It's how you measure up based on the scale of your economy. And when you're a smaller market like Canada, and when I say smaller, I mean, I've heard it from various different international global platforms that, Canada's small potatoes for us. When you're a smaller economy, you have to be ahead of the curve. You have to do more. If you want to stand out, you have to be better than the US. You have to be better than the European Union in order to attract companies to come here, investment to come here, talent to want to stay here. And so from that perspective, I don't think we're doing too well, but from the perspective of, is there a framework? Are some things clear? Somewhere in the middle, but now that the European Union has come out with its own framework and its implementation and enforcement, we're actually looking less competitive right now. And that was
super interesting.
Yeah,
no,
yeah.
but like,
sorry.
Great to set the stage for my next question, which is, for the other panelists in each of your own businesses and operations, how have you found that the Canada regulatory landscape is? Like, has it been helpful or have you been like limited by it?
So I interface with the regulators on a very common occurrence, and I've been, within the crypto space working on behalf of exchanges or running my own exchange for about 7 years now. So I've seen it go from the Quadriga debacle into somewhat of a clear regulatory framework to watching the first Bitcoin closed-end funds to be listed on the TSX, and so I've seen it firsthand. I would say the prognosis is that Canada is tough but sort of fair when it comes to regulators and how they view crypto. And when we think about securities and commodities and the way that they classify these assets, I think it really does go to the exchanges, and they bear a lot of the I guess criticism, but also work and costs for working with regulators to get them to think about the space with a let's see what an interesting approach could look like, instead of approaching everything with like a no, and then sort of prove it to me that you guys are good actors. But it's understandable where they're coming from. We see tons of like money laundering and fraud go through the banks. Like my company stops tens of millions of dollars per year in Canadians that would have onboarded to a retail exchange, not spoken to anyone, and become defrauded. I think the biggest issue is with banking. Crypto companies cannot get banking in Canada. We've been running for 4 years. We're a very high integrity regulated shop, and we still don't have a major banking partner in Canada. So that's a huge issue. There are banks that will refuse wire transfers from customers, who are going in to try to buy crypto. And as I mentioned, having a crypto-related company and not being able to have banking is really stressful, especially if you get the bank as a partner and then they shut down your account and then you can't make payroll. Things like that happen all the time. It's something that needs to change. But I've been saying that for about 7 years now, and things haven't really changed as drastically as they should. But overall, we do have a regulatory framework. It is frustrating for Canadian companies, because we don't have as deep pockets as U.S. incumbents who are looking to enter into the Canadian ecosystem, and the market is just not big enough to compete with major securities exchanges and platforms. So tough but semi-fair, and we need to do much better on the banking front.
Listen, I agree with everything that you say. I think it's frustrating. It's difficult to break through into the regulatory framework. I'm talking to U.S. companies. They're like, Matt, look, Canada's great, but it's still a small market. Why do I want to go through all this effort for a small market when I can look elsewhere where there's a bigger market and there may be just as much difficulty getting in? So it's opportunity costs. One of the places where we pivoted is to look at, companies that are growing nonetheless and need a tech shop somewhere. So we worked with Ripple a few years back. Now they have a R&D engineering office here in Toronto because they needed that talent. So it's still adding to the ecosystem, because we hope sooner or later changes will come and Toronto and Canada as a whole can be a leader in this space. But from my perspective, I'm not someone that's totally in this space, but I see the strength that these banks have and how conservative we are as a government to make any judgments or kind of forward-looking movements. We're just risk adverse. There's a mountain to climb that's unfortunate, but if you've seen some changes over the years, if we can keep moving forward and looking forward. But one thing, look, I've been so impressed, because one of the items, when we talk to companies, it's not, I'll reach out to these folks and say, listen to industry. They'll tell you kind of what's going on, but just to hear the optimism on the talent and the ecosystem that's here and kind of what you're building, I get the sense that there's something going on. It's just, we have to wait, unfortunately, for the folks to pass a few things through.
I'll just double click, maybe like a lot for like the DeFi perspective here. And I think from a regulatory standpoint, we see a lot of talent and a lot of companies that emerge here in Canada, Toronto, Waterloo, Montreal. But when they think about, if you're a DeFi protocol, and you think about decentralization, right? Like the D in DeFi is decentralization, which really has a lot to do with governance systems and DAOs, right? So when we think about that, and they're thinking about, okay, can I set up a DAO in Canada? Is there any legal framework for that? There really isn't right now. A DAO isn't a recognized legal entity in Canada. There are other jurisdictions around the world where DAOs are legally recognized. And so a lot of Canadian startups, I'm dealing with one right now, like as an advisor who's looking at the team's looking at decentralizing the protocol, and they're looking at, you know, places like Bermuda, Bahamas, Dubai, and many other places where there might be a more comprehensive regulatory framework. I think Bermuda, for example, has probably one of the world's most comprehensive frameworks. It's called DABA, so it's the Digital Asset Business Act. And they're now looking at, okay, how do we actually encourage these companies to come here, specifically not just the Coinbases and the Cash Apps and a lot of the exchanges that we've seen move out there, but specifically the DAOs that want to be incorporated out here. And as a DAO, you can set up as a purpose trust, you can set up as a foundation. There's many different kind of legal frameworks you can use. So I look at areas like Wyoming, for example, right? And I think Caitlin Long has really spearheaded a lot of this. Wyoming they've actually recognized DAOs like DAO LLCs as a legal entity with DAO decisions and actions permissible in a court of law, right? And we look at, they recently launched DUNAs, which are DAO unincorporated not-for-profit or associations, which still gives DAOs like a personality, basically the ability to hold assets, the ability to engage in contractual agreements, and hire employees and do all that kind of stuff. You know, and a lot of VC firms and a lot of capital, you know, is flowing to areas where there's that regulatory clarity around DAOs. We've actually lost a huge opportunity because, you know, there's been this gray space around DAOs and crypto in general. You know, as Morva said, you know, there's no real solid framework. There's guidance. You know, and I feel like the Ontario Securities Commission and the Canadian Securities Administrators are very much like at a standstill. Like progress has been glacial. So I think this is one area that I think there needs to be a focus on. You know, is the DAO framework and making it a legal kind of entity here in Canada. I think we'll see a lot more talent and capital stay here if we do have something like that.
I agree. I think DeFi and DAOs are like huge blind spots right now.
Yeah.
I just want to add, and maybe open it up for discussion, this idea of these other jurisdictions and how they've opened up the regulatory framework to attract companies to their spot. And this comes down to investment attraction, specifically in the work that I do. And let's take Bermuda, for example, which have done a fantastic job. But if you want to move there or relocate there, even for a few years, you have kids, it's $30,000 per year to put your kid through school. Rent there is about $10,000 a month for a 3-bedroom apartment. Same with Wyoming. Listen, it's not going to be as expensive, but Wyoming is not a multicultural city like Toronto is.
Understatement.
Pardon me?
Understatement.
Yeah, so there's a bit of a disconnect. Sometimes the places that offer the best incentives or open up the regulatory framework to go and play in, they need you more than you need them in the sense of where you're going to build your company. And I'm of the opinion that's the opportunity that Toronto has, where we have everything that you need. Just bloody hell, get on with it, and let's catch up a bit to make this a place where people will stay. But I hear even so in Europe, Liechtenstein and a few other jurisdictions, I'm like, yeah, that's great that they're doing that, but I don't see that as a long-term option or viable option for founders that want to build something, not just about their company, but about their family and about their future. So just a thought I'm throwing out there.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. It reminds me of New York, actually, where, you know, so much of crypto is based, and it's probably the most unfriendly jurisdiction in the world.
It's a dichotomy, isn't it?
Yeah. So, but I think it's very similar with Canada and Toronto. Like there's so many limitations, but so many also opportunities there. Like and like the ingredients are there, and it's just frustrating that regulators, government agencies just don't see it. It's like they're shooting themselves in the foot.
Right. One thing I'll add to that is if you're a regulator in Canada, let's say in Toronto or Vancouver, and you know, like Matt mentioned, like there's so much, there's so many different people that come here for a better life or for more opportunity, and there's a bigger picture that a regulator has to think about here. And I've never, and as Mike mentioned, like I do think things from a regulatory perspective here are fair. They're not the most advanced, and they're probably not the best approach, but they're fair from an investor protection perspective. And I do think that regulators here and policymakers here have been following like a policy of containment. Like, we don't understand this stuff. We don't know if this is the future. The ecosystem has to prove to us that it's the future. But until then, we're just going to contain it to where it is right now. And we're going to consolidate it as much as possible. We're going to centralize it as much as possible to a few actors that we trust. And that's it. Until this proves to us that there's more of a promise here for the greater public good in the Canadian economy. And I think that's kind of at odds with what it takes to be innovative. And that's sort of I think the weird irony that we all have to contend with if we're builders and community builders in the Web3 space. Because I don't think it's so much that regulators don't want anyone to build anything new or to innovate. It's just that they're too risk averse, and their job at the end of the day is to protect investors. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg. What comes first, like good regulation or more innovation? And everything, I feel, my personal opinion, is at a bit of a standstill. And that happens in places like New York, places where everybody wants to be, where a lot of people's money is at, where a lot of people choose to live. And it means there's more at risk and there's more at play in terms of what regulators have to consider. Whereas in places like Bermuda, they're like, no, we need you.
Right.
Here's all these incentives. We want more people here. So we don't have that problem here, frankly.
Right,
so and so that's why we see the current state of affairs.
So we've talked about how there is so much talent here in Canada, and the education system is here to encourage that, and builders are here. What about users? Like, I'd love some perspective on crypto adoption in Canada. I said, mostly being used as an investment, or I don't know, are there other use cases that have gained traction? Maybe some stats, like what percentage of Canada holds crypto, like something just to get a sense of how much adoption there is in the country.
I think Canada has one of the highest rates of crypto adoption in the G7 and therefore G20. Very wealthy population as pertains to crypto holdings. Regulators have sort of forced Canadians to be more of like a long-term investor. Someone, I think someone who's considered retail or non-accredited, they can only buy up to a certain amount of, assets that are outside of like their top four. And they have essentially banned margin trading exchanges and derivative exchanges. So like Morva said, and put it really great, that they are totally focused on consumer protection. But I think there's a line where they can cross over to being too protective or potentially naive in terms of how people interact with protocols and the way that crypto trades, since it's not the TSX, it's traded 24/7. So yeah, again, I think their risk averse approach, which is maybe good in the short run as the infrastructure becomes more stable, could backfire in the medium to long term as folks go offshore just in order to get a derivatives trading account because they see the opportunity in crypto and want to take advantage of it while it's still a newer space. So yeah, I mean, altogether, it's a pretty big market for the size of the population, but there are huge restrictions and barriers for folks to make use of protocols, DeFi protocols, as well as trading platforms, and the amount that they can invest into the ecosystem safely. So yeah, big-ish market for the size of the population, however restricted into the functionality of what can be done within it.
Super interesting.
Go ahead.
I was just going to add one more quick thing, which is, for DeFi protocols, they have to kind of geo-block certain jurisdictions. So for example, if you're operating a DeFi protocol front end specifically, it has to be geo-blocked to the United States. United States can't, anyone from there can't participate, whereas Canada is still open. It doesn't need to be geo-blocked. And I think the UK has certain restrictions as well. So I would imagine I don't know if there's a lot of data out there on how many DeFi users there are in Canada, but I can speak personally because I co-run the DeFi Toronto meetup. We've got over 3,000 members. It's globally, but there's tons of activity and there's tons of people that are participating without those restrictions. So I think we've got a healthy amount of Canadians that are participating in DeFi. Yeah.
I was just going to piggyback off what Mike said, and I think, one, I agree with you. There isn't a lot of data on what Canadians are doing. There's a lot of data on what's happening at the global scale, but specifically in Canada, like how many Canadians use stable coins for payment or how many Canadians are investing. There are some government reports on this, but they don't tend to be recent because, and it's not helpful because things evolve on a day-to-day basis. But I do think that the way the regulatory environment is set up, it does nudge people to long-term investment when it comes to crypto. And I do think that most folks in Canada, my anecdotal opinion, are more in the longer-term investment side of things. But what was really interesting, I think just like stepping outside of crypto a bit, like I went to an event that was hosted by the Ontario Securities Commission a few months ago, and they were talking about how self-directed investing is on the rise, and that's a concern for them because people aren't talking to a financial advisor, and apparently people are going to Reddit for information, and that's bad. And they were like talking about strategies on how to curb that. But they were not just them, but also like folks from federal government, Finance Canada, FCAC, a bunch of other regulators. They were talking about this rise in self-directed investment, and crypto is a form of self-directed investment, and regulators are concerned with that. And so if we take that, I think whether or not people are looking to buy crypto for a longer term or shorter term or whatever it may be, they're not doing it by talking to their RBC financial advisor. They're doing it on their own, and they have their own reasons for it. And so I think as the ecosystem evolves, we'll see more and more of that, and we'll see more use cases come out because people are making decisions for themselves, but then the regulatory environment might respond to that, not in a great way. One thing I do hope that we can do in the next few years in Canada is have more Canadian data unique to Canada in terms of like better understanding our market, our ecosystem, the users, because then that can actually inform policymaking as well, which we unfortunately don't have right now.
Something interesting about self-directed trades probably going up in a massive way also goes along with just increasing inflation in Canada, and the fact that it's so hard for people to get ahead that they just figure, hey, well, I need to take this risk. Like, I believe in this. I don't trust my financial advisor who's probably making the same amount of money as I am. I want to be able to buy my first house, but I need $400K for the down payment. It's a really interesting sort of line that we're on right now where folks are desperate to get ahead if they're in their 20s, even in their 30s. They want to move out of their parents' house, and maybe they do spend time on Reddit or on Twitter, but they're educating themselves. And it shouldn't be that government or regulators step in to get in front of those personal decisions that might allow them to move forward in Canada. There are just way too many limitations to them, and it has become increasingly impossible to live a good, normal life here in Canada unless you're making a serious amount of money. And then once you start making a serious amount of money, then they come and take all your money. So yeah, it's a really, really tough atmosphere for a lot of people. And I think some of those barriers should be, I don't think they should be thinking about taking personal choice away from folks managing their own money. I think that should be very like laissez-faire, but that's my personal opinion.
What they were saying at the OSC dialogue, they were talking about the 30K limit on crypto in Ontario, and they were like, we should apply that to everything when it comes to self-directed investing. We should take lessons from that, and so that's where their head is at. It's like, well, people don't know what's best for themselves, and we should put those limits on. I mean, this is just at a conference and they were just talking, but yeah.
That's very scary. We should all be very alarmed, and we should keep that in mind next time we go to the pools, for sure.
Yeah.
That's
I agree.
unnerving to hear that narrative or that line of thought that the government knows better, that, and should direct what everyone should, that nobody knows what to do with their own money. I mean, but I think, is there some maybe optimism going forward in that, if like the macro environment is pushing Canadians to, take a chance on crypto or just learn more about it or, invest in it, do you think that might end up pushing regulators to take it seriously? Is that maybe a way forward for these challenges to resolve down the line?
Well, the only optimistic thing that I can think of is that like we're coming into an election next year, so there needs to be massive change across the board. And like kudos to Morva for like spearheading regulatory stuff here in Canada, but I mean, the banks are way too much of a monopoly to let things get so much better if they're disagreeing with moving crypto forward. The recent capital gains hike is really troublesome for, again, folks that are trying to get ahead and invest in different digital assets and really anything, including private investments. And so yeah, I mean, change might come next year, and I think based on what I've seen, that could be very, very good for the digital asset space, but just Canada overall, and retaining wealth and talent, and hopefully attracting some of that talent that's gone away back to Canada, because I mean, it's actually a very, very dire situation. So right now, no optimism other than the fact that there could be some change next year.
I'll just maybe add to that, and yeah, I agree. I think it's a little bit of a scary picture right now for most Canadians, because the path is still very unclear. But I think if change is going to happen, there's a lot of fintechs now that are kind of migrating into the space of crypto. So like Wealthsimple, the Cohos, and many others that are now starting to kind of eat the banks' lunch, and the banks are kind of worried, and of course, like the demographic, is changing, right? There's this huge wealth transfer happening from the baby boomers to the next generation to the millennials and so on and so forth. And a lot of them are mobile first, crypto first, kind of fintech first. Most of them actually don't think very highly of the banks in Canada. That also has a lot to do with the fact that, as you pointed out, like there's this oligopoly in Canada. 5 or 6 banks control the majority of how Canadians interact with their finances. It's not like a very diverse ecosystem where there's a lot of choices like we have in the US or in Europe or other areas around the world. So because of that, I think there's a lot of protectionism around the banks, and the banks are going to definitely push back. But the fintechs are starting to kind of make headway, and Wealthsimple, I think, was one of the first ones in Canada to unlock deposit your crypto, stake it with us as well, and now you can earn staking yield. And I don't think they're going to be the first. I think the dominoes are starting to fall. So I think if anyone's going to make a really big push for a little bit more open regulation here in Canada, I think it's going to be important organizations like the one that you're leading, as well as going to the poll and Canadians themselves making specific choices during elections. But I think the fintechs have a huge role to play
Interesting.
in pushing the government.
I'll just say I will focus on the optimism, and definitely an upcoming election. I think whatever your political opinions may be, it's always good to send a message during elections, especially to a government that's been around for a long time and there are serious opposition contenders. We've heard from opposition parties as well that the only thing we care about is to just hear from your users, right? And there is this, especially with the Conservative Party right now, there's this wave of a bit of a populist tone to how they're setting up the next election, really talking about, they're going to stand up to the monopolies. And that's speaking to, grocers and big telecom, banks, the three big monopolies that every Canadian, is disgruntled with right now. And so I do think that there's a huge opportunity for this community's message to resonate. Because I think if you work for a big monopoly right now, you're not going to have a good time appealing to the current government or to the potential next government. And so what we've heard from for folks in government and also folks running in the next election is just get your users to talk to us. Just get the average crypto person to talk to us. Show us what the what your scale looks like. Show us that people care. And as long as we show up and the community shows up and does that before the next election, whether it's organized by us or by DeFi Toronto or whoever it may be, if you have a platform, your users, or I always say in Canada you don't need to get millions of people to send letters. It's a few hundred, and that's impact enough. Because I've worked in a constituency office before, even 20 letters rattles them. So we just need people to show what they think at the polls and also be very vocal. And so what I'm optimistic about is that the window of opportunity is there. And from a regulatory perspective, look at what's happening in the US. It's regulation by enforcement. Everybody is embroiled in a lawsuit right now. Thankfully, we don't have that here right now. At least there is some sort of path to negotiate productively with somebody and to figure something out. And so I do think that sets the stage for success for the next few years. Is if we want to hustle hard between now and next October 2025, we have our window of opportunity to really make a difference. And that sends a message to regulators in Canada as well. As soon as the tides change, they know they're going to have to also change their position as well. So that's I think we have a lot of positive change to look forward to around this time next year. By the end of next year, I really feel optimistic.
I love that message, and I think that you mentioned how things are better than the U.S., but even in the U.S., the crypto community there, crypto lobby now was able to actually make a change, and I think maybe people hold back and don't make their voices heard because they think they won't matter. But and I thought there's change in the U.S. is going to take years and years. But in the end, they actually were able to make an impact in this year's election, and it's happened seemingly overnight. Obviously, there was so much work behind that with Blockchain Association and Coinbase lobbying and Uniswap and the VCs.
So much money.
So much money into it. So there's a lot of pieces that went into it, but change did happen, and now we have both big parties kind of competing on who's more pro crypto. Who would have thought? So I think if it can happen there where things are so much worse,
Absolutely.
it can happen here.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
In the U.S., you have the super PACs, and you've got an avenue to really direct change with where you put your money. There isn't as much party discipline there. So if you're a Democrat, you can vote against your party or campaign on something against your party if you get enough donations from an interest group. We don't have that set up in Canada, but at the same time, I think that incentivizes candidates and parties to really listen to what voters are saying, and that's a real opportunity there. And also, it's good for everyone's wallet. So, I feel optimistic.
Nice. Well, unless anyone else has any closing statement, no? I think we should close on that really optimistic note
before it gets worse.
Thanks so much.
All right, awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.